Hello friends, and thank you for joining me here at Non-Toxic Home. We are always glad that you join us, and as always, I'm coming at you from our Non-Toxic Home. If you are new to this series is how to research everything. And in this video today, we're going to discuss deceptive chemical labeling practices. Before I continue, I do need to mention that products besides chemicals also are subject to laws that don't protect we the people, quite frankly. And if you really, truly understand how the world works, which we do discuss in some videos, then you know that it's really companies and corporations that are running the world, not so much politicians these days. If that offends you, I'm sorry. Follow the money. When you have both Republicans and Democrats being funded by the same industries, you got a problem on your hands, my friend. When at least half of the time, statistically, that legislators are using when they're supposed to be working for us, they're actually working on raising funds, you got a problem on your hands, my friend. At least that's the way it works here in the United States. Of course, different countries vary a bit. But generally speaking, it's kind of how the world works. Follow the money, do the research. You really have to invest in understanding and knowledge if you really want to see how the world truly works. And unfortunately, this is the reality that we live in. And so if you have chemical sensitivities, if you're looking to improve your health naturally, if you want to even, shall I say it, cure some diagnoses, such as fibromyalgia. I've got a video up. I know it's on Odyssey and YouTube at least. How I cured fibromyalgia. It's gone, my friends. I've also cured countless food allergies and some other issues as well, of course. I'm still a canary in the coal mine, and there's still some pretty serious things that I'm dealing with, to the extent that I have not left our property since June of 2019. So you have to question everything in this wicked, crazy world. Now, I'm not going to address in this video textile law. Textile law is separate from trade secret law, from law that applies to chemicals. This is different. So, but however, textile law still doesn't protect the people. And if something is labeled, for example, 100% cotton, it's not 100%. It doesn't, well, it can be 100%, but it doesn't have to be 100% to be labeled as 100% cotton. That's a problem if you have a latex allergy or you're trying to avoid latex. So these are all things that you need to consider. I apologize if my face is a bit blinding now and then, but it's actually bright and sunny today, which is lovely, and I'm not going to cover our wonderful, beautiful windows. So trade secret law is a huge problem. It's obviously on the books here in the United States, but there are similar laws on the books across the world in all countries. And the reason I can say this confidently is because I have attempted, by, shall we say, pretending to be from other countries in attempting to obtain full and complete information regarding various chemicals. And it doesn't matter where you're at, you come up with the same thing. Oh, it's a trade secret. We don't have to tell you. Legally, we don't have to tell you. It doesn't matter where you live. The companies and corporations that manufacture toxic chemicals that most people use daily in their lives don't have to tell you what's in their products. So this impacts auto-related chemicals like oils and windshield washer fluid, those sorts of things. It impacts the cleaners that you may use in your home. Now, all you need for cleaning is baking soda, apple cider vinegar, soap, and some hot water. That is seriously all you need. You don't need to purchase any non-toxic, allegedly non-toxic cleaners. Most natural living experts will have their favorite cleaners that they recommend, and of course they make money off of those recommendations. I recommend baking soda, vinegar. If you can't use vinegar, if you can't tolerate vinegar, try making it yourself and see if you tolerate it then, because you probably will. Specifically, white vinegar, white distilled vinegar is very chemically contaminated. They actually, some white vinegar is mostly chemicals and water. So you have to be very careful and knowledgeable and research and question everything. A lot of people are able to make their own vinegar and tolerate that, and that's what I do. And it's cheap to make, so easy to make. And if you're concerned about mold, obviously we are mold aware here, and so all you have to do is just stir your vinegar every day, and it won't go moldy on the top. Problem solved. So cleaners, huge problem with those. If you, for example, contact Shackley, for example, they will not tell you what is in their products. It doesn't matter if you have a laundry list of allergies. If you're airborne anaphylactic to multiple chemicals, doesn't matter. They will not tell you unless they've changed things, which is of course possible, but highly unlikely. And so if any company refuses to disclose chemicals to you, what is in their product, you have to assume that it's toxic. You can't assume that it's non-toxic. Pesticides, huge problem with pesticides. You cannot obtain information, full and complete information. Herbicides, aka weed killers, aka Roundup. So one of the problems with chemicals that are on the market today is that they do not disclose all of the ingredients in their label, and because of that, sometimes, as in, for example, Roundup, while glyphosate is indeed highly problematic and very toxic, what about the products, what about the chemicals that are not disclosed? And a lot of times the chemicals that are not disclosed are of higher concern and more unreasonable toxicity than the chemicals that are disclosed. Also, garden and lawn treatments. Now, this is very, very, very important. This includes so-called natural options that are on the market today. This includes fertilizers. And by the way, when I mentioned herbicides and pesticides, this includes natural herbicides. This includes natural pesticides as well. They do not have to tell you everything that is in their product. They do not have to put it on the label. And if you contact them, they do not have to tell you what's in their product. They'll say, look at the label. That's all that we can say, trade secret. Paint as well. If you want to learn the truth about paint, go to our website and search for paint. Huge problem with paint. I don't recommend any commercial paint, because of the extent of research that I did. And also, we have a lot of people that come to us after taking the advice of experts. And of course, we don't claim to be experts on anything. We simply do our due diligence in research, and we have discernment, and we know how the world works. We follow the money. We do deep research, and we do not recommend anything that could hurt someone to the best of our knowledge. So we have a lot of people that come to us and say, hey, well, I listened and I read this article from this other person, and they're an expert, and I took their advice about paint. And then these people come to us and say, I wish I hadn't taken their advice. I wish I'd taken your advice. And I'm like, well, sorry to hear that. So sorry to hear that. I did the same thing for many years as well. I listened to the experts for decades, and my health status today, my health problems today is due to listening to the experts. So you really, really have to question everything and be very, very careful and diligent about the research you do. So also, besides pesticides, herbicides, chemical and lawn treatments, fertilizers, cleaners and sanitizers, that's a huge problem today. A lot of people are using cleaners and sanitizers that they're told on the bottle are natural. Okay, the word natural is not regulated. It means absolutely nothing. You do not need these toxic things to have a clean house. And also, if you're killing all of the so-called all the so-called germs, if you're killing all of the bacteria around you, your immune system is going to die. You need your immune system. Your immune system needs to have access to bacteria and such. And right now I don't have any dirt under my fingernails. That's a common thing for me in the summertime, to have dirt under my fingernails. And if I didn't do that, then I'm certain that my microbiome would not have healed to the extent that it has. My gut bacteria was seriously screwed up after decades of pharmakeia and listening to the experts and trusting the experts. Also, there are many other products as well that are subject to trade secret law, where they don't have to put on the label all of the ingredients. Labels only tell you some of the components. Now, this includes the SDS. Now, if you're confused and saying, wait, it's MSDS. Well, it used to be MSDS, and they changed it to SDS now. Why did they do it? I don't know. Probably just to confuse us, because that's the name of the game, my dear. So the SDS form can be beneficial. That's typically a good starting point for your research. If it's not available online with a quick search, you just type in your product SDS, and then if it's not available with that, then you can contact the company and request the SDS form. And that's a good start with your research. But you always want to go further than that. So, for example, Purine, which is I just blanked out, a refrigerant that is commonly on the market and commonly used here in the United States, but it's been blacklisted in some areas. It's been banned in some other countries. It is a chemical that is used as a refrigerant in HVAC systems and also other refrigerant systems. If you look at it, there are two primary ingredients on the SDS form for Purine, which is actually manufactured by multiple chemical corporations, which incidentally, a lot of them also produce pharmaceuticals. Isn't that something? So these two chemicals, if you research them separately, your mind will be blown. And you will wonder what in the world such a thing is doing inside people's homes. Now, if you really dig deep into HVAC, you'll find that those who are honest, who work in the industry, will admit, for example, on some HVAC forums, that it's not a matter of whether or not there is a refrigerant leak at any given moment in an HVAC system. The question is how much of a leak there is. Did you catch that? That's a problem. So if you have these two chemicals that make up Purine that are non-toxic, so Purine is declared to be non-toxic, correct? But if you research the two primary chemical components, those two separate components are incredibly toxic. So that's just one method of ascertaining the truth about the SDS forms. Now, if you read an entire SDS sheet, oftentimes most of the spaces will say unknown, not known, unresearched. We don't know, but it's non-toxic. Trust us. We're selling it to you. Believe us when we tell you it's safe for you. Don't worry about it. Just, hang in there. Barely surviving for the next 30 years. And then when there's a class action lawsuit, we'll give you $500 in exchange for all of the pain and suffering and inability to work and lost income and all of these other problems that we caused, including cancer and possibly death. Whoops. Okay, so here's the way that chemicals are approved for use. Generally speaking. Now, some chemicals, you got to listen to this, all right? This is important. Some chemicals have no testing whatsoever. They're developed in a lab. They are tested for efficacy in various manners, because if they have one chemical that's developed, then whoever develops that chemical, they want to get the most bang for their buck, right? And this makes sense. This is logical. And so when they do so, they say, okay, well, maybe this can be a pharmaceutical for something. Maybe this can be an herbicide for something. Maybe we can put this and use this as a part of a medical product in addition to an actual pharmaceutical. Maybe we can use this as a weed killer or any of these other various applications. Because, as I said, that's logical. They want to get the most bang for their buck. And so, depending on the intended application, there may or may not be any studies done as to toxicity. And if you don't have a background in research methodology, if you don't have a background in research methods, then you may or may not be aware of just how easy it is to obtain a desired outcome for any particular study. So the way that academia runs is that there's funding. All right, follow the money. I have experience in academia. I know this, all right? The way it works is that a professor, let's say a pharmacist, is interested in doing research on, let's say, cancer, or some sort of cancer drug. And so he contacts Lilly, let's say Eli Lilly, because we live in Indiana, and they tell them that. Or more likely, Eli Lilly contacts the professor and says, hey, we have this funding for research on this new chemical that we developed, and we think it can kill cancer cells and be used as a cancer treatment. And so what happens is that then this professor, who relies on funding to do research, and a lot of universities, such as Purdue University, which is where my husband and I went to, are publish or perish universities. That means that if you do not, as a professor, if you do not publish research or studies, then you perish. You're gone. You're out of there. No. If you are an adjunct professor and you aren't publishing research, then you are not going to be ever a full-fledged professor. And once you are a professor, then you've got to publish research if you want to be ever retire. Really, if you want to have tenure. And tenure basically means you really can't be fired, quite frankly. There are, of course, loopholes, but tenure is what professors desire. And so you've got these publish or perish universities that have relationships with all of these companies. For example, the pharmacy school at Purdue University has a very close relationship with Purdue, well, actually not Purdue Pharma anymore. They distanced themselves from Purdue Pharma, but they have close relationships with companies like Eli Lilly and Pfizer and all of these other drug companies. And so what happens is that one way or the other, there's a relationship formed between a professor and a corporation that wants to get a product approved. And so they are told, sometimes directly verbatim, and other times it's implied, that this product needs to be approved for the market. And so this research that is conducted then is conducted either in such a manner as to obtain desired results, or more often, initially a pilot study is done, which is a very, very small study. And this very small study gives some indicators as to how to design a larger study to obtain results that would be favorable for the funder of the research. And there are all sorts of methods that can be used to design a study to obtain specific desirable results. And even if these results are not obtained, statistics can be manipulated in such a manner, oftentimes by throwing out data, by discarding data, by saying, well, these are outliers, and discarding that data. That's very commonly used. Now, there are some valid reasons for discarding data. I have to be clear about this, but this information, then this data then can be processed basically made into processed fake food, okay? If you take, for example, an apple and you process it to death, basically, eventually it's not going to be like the real apple. It's not going to be giving you the same nutrition, the same information to your body as the original raw apple. And so this is what happens. And so then the statistics are manipulated, the data is manipulated, and to obtain the desired result. Now, if they don't do that, if that doesn't work, a lot of studies, a lot of researchers will still obfuscate the truth. And what I mean by this is they'll use ivory tower language to make it where they are actually disclosing the fact of the result of their study, but the language is so convoluted that the average person will read it and think otherwise. They'll think that, okay, well, all right, so this is non-toxic then, this is safe. And sometimes they'll just come right out and say, our studies we don't agree with our results. And generally they won't have much evidence that is true evidence behind that. And so this is how chemical companies work. They have a very close relationship with academia. A lot of academics, not all, but a lot of them actually make more money from writing opinion pieces and such for the whatever industry that they are associated with than they do from the college or university that they work for. And this happens in history, this happens in religion, this happens across industries. But they're experts. All right, so trust the experts. All right, so these are only starting points. But obviously, as I've already discussed, undisclosed ingredients are a huge problem. Now, when something is submitted to, let's say, the EPA, for example, or the USDA for consideration, let's say for, well, the EPA is very minimally funded, but as are a lot of acronym agencies. And of course, the acronym agencies are basically the corporations, okay, because they're just revolving doors. And this has been documented in various senatorial hearings and judicial hearings, and over and over and over. It's just a revolving door. The industry is the acronym agency. And of course, here in the United States, the acronym agencies have basically the right to do anything at any time without question. They can shut down the entire country at any time for just about any reason, fact-based or not. So for example, with Roundup, glyphosate was only part of it. I honestly don't recall whether the corporations have to give a full and complete list. I do not believe they do, to the acronym agency that is approving the chemical. I do not, if I remember right, they don't have to, generally speaking. And so they will have this one study a lot of times, and sometimes it's even just a pilot study, which, let's face it, a pilot study is a very small piece of information. You need a substantial sample size to really do a good study, all right? That's just the fact of the matter. But these acronym agencies are the industry. The people who work in the acronym agencies go back and forth between the industry and the acronym agencies. So of course they're going to approve because they've got all sorts of ties. They're going to approve regardless of the lack of evidence, or regardless of whether the evidence that's provided is crappy and not worthy of consideration and for anyone with a sound mind and just a little bit of logic. Other chemicals are, for example, for natural pesticides, natural fertilizers, what we're told are natural. They don't actually have to do anything. They don't have to do tests or anything. They just say it's safe and non-toxic, and that's it. And sometimes class action lawsuits come upon those companies and corporations later. Sometimes they don't. Most of the times they don't. Of course, if you listen to any television shows or watch the news or whatever, you know, there's constantly class action lawsuits coming out. And unfortunately, this is the world in which we live in which chemical labels are not complete. And research that's done on chemicals is laughable. It's absurd. I would argue that less than 50, maybe less than 100 chemicals in totality have been thoroughly researched, period, ever, full stop. So the chemicals that are on the market today, for example, there are BPA alternatives. There are chemicals that are used instead of BPA because, of course, BPA was eventually demonstrated to be toxic. But when it was first put on the market, it was the same situation as the chemicals that are replacing BPA, in which there's very, very, very little evidence regarding toxicity, if any at all. Because, like I said, some chemicals, literally, they're on the market and there hasn't been one research study done on them. Okay, this is why everyone's sick. Well, of course, there are non-native EMFs as well, and our soil is crap, so everybody is malnourished. But those are the primary causes of disease: is poisoning and malnourishment. And so people wonder, well, why are we sick? Well, there you go. This is the world in which we live in. Everyone's being poisoned all of the time. So the best thing that you can do for your health, besides researching chemicals to smithereens, is just not to use them, to choose to use truly natural products like vinegar that you make yourself. Again, I do recommend avoiding white distilled vinegar, but you can make your own vinegar from food scraps. It's literally garbage and sugar that you make it from. So it's very, very simple and easy to do as well. And it lasts a long time because you dilute it so much when you use it. And of course, it's sanitizing as well. It kills bacteria. But the fact is that when you live in a world in which you really can't get the truth about chemicals, about any chemical, then you really should consider avoiding them as much as possible. And this includes avoiding plastic as much as possible. I know that there are some plastics, of course, that are less toxic and that are more tolerable than others. For example, spun polypropylene. A lot of people tolerate spun polypropylene very well. A lot of times there's ink on the spun polypropylene as well, though that, of course, just like the other chemicals, not studied. And so this can cause problems for some people, but of course some others cannot tolerate spun polypropylene. It's very rare, but there are some. And of course it gets contaminated with ink a lot of times because anyways, but the fact is that when you live in a world in which we're told that things are safe that haven't been studied, then you want to avoid exposure to those things as much as possible, which means you use glass as much as you can. You avoid plastic as much as you can. You avoid chemicals when you are cleaning. You instead of pouring toxic stuff on your weeds, you put some mulch down. Put a weed barrier down, or you just pull the seeds by hand or pull the weeds by hand. This doesn't take that much more time. It's much better for nature. It's much healthier for you. You're not killing the frogs then. This is almost a radical statement today. But women, do you know what you're putting on your face and your skin? Really? Because you're literally poisoning yourself to death with the crap that you put on your face and your skin in general. And that includes most so-called natural products. I do not recommend any brand of makeup because those natural health experts who do recommend them are making money from recommending them. And they apparently haven't done their due diligence because in a lot of cases, the makeup, the ingredients are right there, and those ingredients are toxic. So if you are focusing on the inner person and the person that you were made to be, you don't need makeup. You don't want makeup. You got better things to do with your time than worry about makeup. Now, it doesn't mean that I didn't used to wear makeup, because I used to, but it's been many, many years. 2012, I believe, is the last time I wore makeup. So 10 years almost. And so you have to be very careful, very diligent, very thoughtful. This isn't something to be overwhelmed about. You just need to go one step at a time. Start with what you're putting in your body first, then what you're putting on your body, and then what's around your body. Start from the inside and work outward. And you will be able to improve your health step by step by step. I guarantee you, it may not be immediate, and in some cases, your body may suddenly go into a Hersheimer reaction and detox like crazy because it's living how you were intended to live suddenly. And once you get over that Hersheimer reaction, which by the way is very rare, you will find that you can think so much more clearly. Chemicals impact your emotions. They impact your ability to exercise critical thought. They keep us under control. They keep us under a heavy, heavy burden. And once you lift that burden and remove that burden as much as possible from your life, you can't control everything. But once you address that as much as you can, you will feel like a whole different person and you will be able to think again. So until next time, keep researching, keep thinking, keep studying. Please ring the bell, give this a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And share this with anyone who you think might benefit. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful and blessed day.